Welcome to the Books on Air podcast. I'm Suzanne Harris, and my listeners get the story behind every book. Joining me today is Jean-Marie de la Trinite, and he's here to talk about his book, The Mystic, Trinity Series Book 1, Journey of Atonmemnon to the Plains of Peace. Among other things, and Jean-Marie is so many things, he is an author, a mystical theologian, a philosopher, a spiritual guide, a novelist, a poet, and a painter. He studied classical philosophy, existentialism, and theology at Loyola University in Chicago, Hindu, Buddhist, and Sufi mystical traditions at the University of Chicago, and scripture at the University of San Francisco. Jean-Marie, welcome to Books on Air. It is such a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Suzanne. It's great and wonderful to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Well, I can't wait to talk about the book, and I'm always very curious. To me, every book has two stories. Sometimes the stories are the same, but often they're very different. The first story is the story that's obvious, the one that the reader gets as they read through the book. But there's always a second story. There's a second story about how the book came into being. How did the mystic...
Yes.
Oh, yes, I'm curious. How did the mystic come into being?
Well, it's kind of a phenomenal story. To me, it's a miracle. It's a miracle of grace. I've always wanted to write ever since I was a small child, but I didn't start writing until I was about 14 years old or so, when I wrote my first poetry. But there was always something in me that was this urge to put things down in words. Now, I didn't write much after the first two poems that I wrote when I was in high school at the age of 14. But there was always this kind of burning urgency. It was like a prayer of my being to be a writer. And that didn't come to fruition until much later on, when I was even out of college. And I'd done some traveling. I had lived in monastery for a while in isolation at Big Sur in California with the Camaldolese hermits there. And actually, it was there on that property during that time of retreat that something happened spiritually and inspirationally and artistically within me that kind of opened the floodgates to all the literature that I have written following that. And the first book is The Mystic. It's not necessarily the first one that I wrote, but it's the first one in the order of the series. It came about actually by grace. I had a job while I was living with the hermits, which was to deliver food to the retreatants at lunchtime. And I had a little cart that I would wheel down the pathway and knock on every cell door and place the food in the trap door that opened. And I was coming down the trail one day with my cart, and it was as though the sky itself had just opened up above me, and light poured down into me, and I was simply on fire, not with words, not with poems, not with prose, but with the energy, the pure energy of creation. And I quickly delivered all those luncheon trays and rushed back to my cell. And there I began to write, and it hasn't stopped since. But the mystic comes out of that flow of spiritual energy that impacted me at that initial juncture, that initial coming together of God into my consciousness. So I think it comes from what I call a miracle of grace.
I think that's a perfect way to describe it.
Yes.
Go ahead.
The writing of it was easy because of that. I don't seem to remember a particular plan. The plan of the book developed as I wrote it, but it was all from inspiration and, of course, from my life experience, which is all that is a development of my life experience as consciousness, which I've put down in novel form, in the form of a novel, to say something about this extraordinary power of grace to open human consciousness. So, I don't know, that's a lot of words. I don't know. But, I don't forgot to what you anything you could understand.
No, it takes a lot of words to describe that process and what happens. How many books are in the Trinity series?
30.
30?
Yes, there's 30. Actually, actually there's 50, but the first part is this 30 volume series, and now I'm writing the second part, which I just finished on Sunday.
Wow!
And that has 20 more books to it.
Jean-Marie, that is prolific. It's prolific. And I watched your video. You have a video on one of your websites that we'll talk about in a few moments. But I watched the video that talks about your writing process. Do you use the same writing process every day?
Yes, it's a part of my being, actually. It's who I am as a writer. The only decision I make to write is time of day. I write a little bit in the morning, a little bit around the noon hour, and a little bit in the evening. Now that doesn't happen every day, but it generally works out that way. I write in 3 sessions per day. But yeah, and it's not something that I have to strive for. I open myself in prayer, and then I sit down and write.
That's what I was wondering. I thought that the words just flow, don't they?
Yes, absolutely, they do.
Let's give our listeners a little overview of the mystic, about the story of Aton.
Oh, well, Aton, of all my characters, not because he's the first necessarily, but maybe it is because he's the first one, but he's like my favorite. I shouldn't have favorites among my characters because they don't appreciate it, I'm sure. But Aton,
and they know.
Right. But Aton is he's like the spirit of myself, and his life journey mirrors mine in consciousness, not in the facts of his life, but in the developmental process of his conscious or superconscious development. And the novel is not a novel so much of outward activity. It's not a plot-based novel, so to speak. It's more interior. It's more consciousness-based. Now, plenty happens exteriorly or objectively, but the real drama is the development of Aton's consciousness to the point that he is divine consciousness itself. And, of course, this is what so many people search for today. I mean, it's all over the Internet and all over the news, and anywhere you turn, you find people who are looking for superconsciousness, awareness, they call it, spiritual awakening, spiritual enlightenment. And that's the journey that Aton goes through. And as it so happens, it coincides with the process of the world itself coming to an end and to a rebirth. So he himself is the interior key to what's happening in the world around him. He is the spiritual or conscious or aware center of this whole thing. He is the heart of this of the movement of the world that's going to its end to be recreated. And that's been his experience through his life. He goes through a series of births and deaths, constant birth and constant dying, and that's simply the experience that's simply human experience that's magnified on a superconscious level. But in our everyday life, we all go through the same process of many, that means small, MINI, life's births and deaths. So that's essentially his function in the novel.
Now, you are such a multi-talented individual. I introduced you at the beginning, and two of the things that I said were that you were an artist, a painter, and that you were a poet. You have designed the book cover of The Mystic.
Yes.
Tell me about the book cover and how the design came about.
That also happened at Big Sur, where I was in Hermitage. It's a study of the face of Christ, and I just used it as the cover for the book. I painted it while I was at Big. No, I didn't paint that at Big Sur. I'm sorry. I painted earlier paintings that were leading up to this particular image while I was at Big Sur. But then when I was in San Francisco a few years later, this is when this painting came to reality. I love it very much. I hate to say it, but it's probably my favorite of my paintings.
It's very striking. It's very
Thank
striking.
you.
That's one of the reasons I wanted to mention it, because I thought it was striking. You also included in The Mystic some poetry.
Yes. You might say poetry is my first love, because the first things I wrote were two small poems, and it was my idea or my passion to write poetry. And I had written a little bit over the years, but nothing like what happened after this experience I told you that occurred at Big Sur. Once that happened, then the floodgates of poetry opened, and they have not closed since. So just to give you an idea, I've written 12,000 sonnets alone. And
wow, 12,000?
Yes, well, it's more than that. It's over 12,000. I don't know quite how many there, but I'd say around 12. It's 12,000 plus. And I've written an epic. This is all a part of Trinity, of which The Mystic is the first volume. And I've written an epic of 3,000 pages of 36 lines per page of rhyming iambic pentameter. So that's my epic poem, and philosophy and theology. All of it goes into developing the personality of Atonmemnon, what he is as a spiritual being, and all the aspects of his being. So he's a philosopher, he's a poet, he's a novelist, he's a singer, he's a dancer, he's an actor. Did I say painter? He's a painter, he's all of that. So, yes, that's he is the core of the whole series. It's all like the reflections from a prism. Atonmemnon is the prism, and the light of God that strikes him are all these various rays flashing out in different forms of art.
Oh, what a beautiful analogy.
Yes.
That's a beautiful analogy, and immediately I saw that in my mind. Yeah, that's lovely. I would expect nothing less. I mean, the things that you have described, your mind is just one of those wonderful minds that has been touched, and you are experiencing some amazing things. When you were writing the mystic in particular and the Trinity in general, did you have an audience in mind? Were there people that you were thinking about who might read the book when you were writing?
Oh, yes. People like myself, people who are on the road to spiritual awakening, if they haven't already arrived there, and just want to continue on the path and continue in their growth. I want to encourage people to realize that there is no end to spiritual growth. Once we step onto that path, there is no end. We stay on it until we transition to the next world. And these are the people I want to read the work so that they might be encouraged, by the experience of Aton in his life journey. They see in him a person who is completely open-ended, not closed to any experience except to not be a nasty person, so to speak. So he wants to close himself off from anything shady, anything evil, and he wants to do good in the world. But above all, he wants to become good. He wants to be goodness itself, and good is just another name for what we call God. It's integral being. It's complete reality. It's the realization of all things beautiful. And one of the great driving forces of his life is the quest for beauty. It probably stands out even above the idea of spirituality itself. His quest is really for beauty, and he thinks of God within himself as pure beauty, and that's the spiritual groundwork of his becoming an artist in all these different ways. Because for him, all the arts are expressions of beauty, as is nature, as is love, as is the human experience. It's all beauty. So that's where he is. He stands at the center of God consciousness as beauty.
Well, I like that. Now, I'm sure, we have talked about so many things. I'm sure our listeners are saying, all right, where can I find the book? Let me tell you, it is available on Amazon. All you have to do is go to Amazon, and I'm going to shorten the title for you, because if you put in simply The Mystic, and that's spelled Mystic, by Jean, Jean Marie, Marie, Day, De, La, La, Trinite, Trinite. Click on it.
Exactly right. Yes.
Thank you. I've worked on that.
It's quite a mouthful, I know.
I always really try to make sure I can pronounce an author's name correctly, because I respect authors so much. I never want to mispronounce their name. So I really worked at pronouncing La Trinité, de la Trinité. I worked on my pronunciation, so thank you very much for noticing. Now, all you have to do is put The Mystic by Jean-Marie de la Trinité in that search feature. Click on it, and you'll see the wonderful cover that he has drawn. And in the upper right-hand corner, if you've never been to Amazon before, or if you've never done this before, in the representation of the cover, In that right-hand corner, you see two words. It says, look inside. If you simply touch your cursor and click on those two words, the book will electronically open. And what that means is that you'll be able to see inside the book, and you'll be able to read a really nice excerpt. You can also buy it right there on the same page. Now, Jean-Marie, I know that some of our listeners would prefer to buy their books elsewhere because they feel like Amazon is the huge 300, 800-pound gorilla in booksellers right now. So they would like to give their buying power to a smaller organization. Is there somewhere else that they could buy a copy of The Mystic?
Oh, yes. It can be purchased at Barnes & Noble. To just go to their website and put in The Mystic with some portion of my name. It will come up and you can purchase it there. It's also available on my own website, which is www.jmtrinite.
Now, what else is on that website? Because you have several websites that I looked at when I was preparing for the interview. Tell me what's on the www.jmtrinity.com website.
Oh, that has, it's like my life history is on that website. I'd like to actually look at it myself so that I don't lead anyone astray.
I think there's a blog there, and I think there is a wonderful video of you right there. Yes, on that first page. Blog.
Yes. There are reviews of the book. There's information about myself. There is a blog in which people can participate and can leave comments, and I will respond if I'm able to. And the book can be purchased there. And that's about it. And it has a media gallery which has some of my videos, which are also able to be found on YouTube.
How could they find them on YouTube, Jean-Marie?
Okay, well, you would just go to YouTube and type in my name, Jean-Marie de la Trinité.
And there it is. There you are. And
then things will pop up from my site, yes.
That introductory video, I felt like when I called you and we started the interview, I felt like I knew you. You'd done such a good job with that introductory video. So I encourage our listeners to go to your website and look at that video. I think it's always so powerful to be able to see the author and to hear their voice.
Yes,
this is your work. You are doing a tremendous amount of work around this area. I want to give you the opportunity to give some final thoughts to our listeners. When they become readers and they purchase their copy of The Mystic and they read, and they come to the end and they close the back cover either electronically or physically for the last time, what do you want them to take away from that first book in the Trinity series?
I think the very first thing I want people to take away is a sense of openness to what is possible. That the heart itself be open to infinite possibilities. Now that becomes concrete in the rest of the volumes that are written, because you can go on reading. I mean, the Mystic is not the end; it's really the introduction. Even though it stands alone and of course, can be read as a piece unto itself, but it really is the beginning. It's the opening of the door, and behind that door is a universe of other thought and poetry and drama. So, and all of it geared toward the perfection of human consciousness, the heart of wisdom and love. in humanity, in mankind.
Jean-Marie, you are inspirational. You are fun to talk to. It has just been an absolute delight to have you as my guest today on Books on Air. Thank you.
You as well. Wonderful to talk with you. Thank you, Susan.
My pleasure. Now remember, you can find your copy of The Mystic by Jean-Marie de la Trinité on Amazon. You've been listening to the Books on Air podcast, brought to you on webtalkradio.net. You can also hear this podcast on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, and Apple Podcasts. I'm Suzanne Harris, and I hope that you'll join me for our next Books on Air podcast. Because remember, you never know who's going to be here, and you never know what we're going to talk about. Thank you so much for listening.